What's up, everyone, and welcome back to Brian Sports Hub. If you are new here, my name is Brian. I am the host of this podcast. In today's episode, I'm going to go over 5 statements from week 1 of the NFL, and I'm going to tell you guys whether it is an overreaction or not an overreaction. So let me send you straight to the intro now, and then I'll join you guys right after. We can jump right into the first statement. All right, so the first statement of the 5 is Isaiah Likely is the new tight end 1 in Baltimore. And as diehard of a Ravens fan as I am, and as much as I love watching Likely play, I have to say this is an overreaction. Likely is a very talented, very great player, and he's a great second option in the Ravens offense. But I don't believe he's the tight end 1 in Baltimore. He could be the tight end 1 in any other team practically. You know, there's some few that are like the 49ers and the Chiefs and all. But definitely in the future, he can be a tight end 1 on any team. I just don't think it's right now this year on Baltimore. Mark Andrews, if you look back at the game and you really look at what Andrews was doing, Andrews was double covered a large portion of the game, which means that 2 of Kansas City's 11 defensive players were locked in watching Andrews, making sure he wasn't getting targets or getting open, which leaves a lot of gaps and holes in the defense, which Isaiah Likely was able to take advantage of and then make incredible plays. So even if you look back farther, so that was this week. That was a week ago, Thursday. If you look even back farther to the AFC Championship game, it was the first game Mark Andrews was back since his broken ankle in week 11. And even the Ravens had said that he was not 100% before that game. But if you look at the stats between Likely and Andrews and you compare them, they had eerily similar stats by the end of the game. Andrews had 2 targets on 2 receptions for 15 yards. Likely had 3 targets on 2 receptions on 3 targets for 16 yards. So if I'm sitting there and I'm watching the game and I see a fully healthy tight end that a lot of people are saying the new tight end 1, and I see a not fully healthy tight end that is the current tight end 1, I would expect the healthy tight end to get more targets. Whether he's tight end 1 or not, I would expect him to get more targets. But he didn't. And that's because Andrews, I think for the rest of his time in Baltimore or the rest of his career, depending on where he goes, he will be that tight end 1 for the Ravens. And I think Likely just has to wait a little bit longer to take that throne. So moving on to the second statement. This is a fun one. Aaron Rodgers' first game back for the Jets. And the statement is the Jets will win the AFC East division. And honestly, completely honestly, this is not an overreaction. So there are 3 things that I was looking at when I was kind of trying to decide whether it's overreaction or not overreaction. You look at their schedule, you look at their division, and you look at how they played Monday. So let's start with Monday, and then I'll go down from there. So Monday, they played the reigning NFC champions in Santa Clara, so in the Bay. And yet they only lost by 13. Now what makes this even more impressive is that this was Aaron Rodgers' first action on the field since tearing his Achilles at MetLife. He never played any preseason. So this was his first time on the field. On top of that, this was his first completed pass ever as a Jet, and it was technically his first game ever as a Jet. And for him to be within 13 points, 2 scores of beating the NFC champions, I think that's incredible, and I think it's a boost of confidence for the Jets, even though a loss doesn't really feel that great. Now, if you look more into the schedule, they have an easier schedule thanks to their lackluster record last year. And they play the Patriots twice because they're division rivals. They play the Broncos, the Vikings, the Cardinals, the Steelers, the Seahawks, and the Titans, all of which are winnable games on paper. I think if you put on paper, you look at the Jets, you look at these teams, the Jets could win every one of those games. Then you look into the Bills and Dolphins series, and I think they'll split it 1-1. Now, if you add all that together, it's about 10 wins, roughly, give or take like 1 or 2 wins or losses. And if you put that up against the rest of the division, that is a great record to actually win the division in. You look at the Patriots, they're in a rebuilding mode. They don't even start Drake May because they're worried about injuring him for no reason. Like the Patriots aren't expected to do anything. They aren't expected to go to the playoffs. So why put your rookie QB in? Just start Jacoby Brissett, who's pretty good. Then you look at the Dolphins. The Dolphins are recouping and getting back players that had injuries, season-ending injuries on lower appendages. So it was like Achilles tears and ACL tears. You look at their 2 top pass rushers, Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb. They went out late last year and like midway through last year. with lower leg injuries. And then at the same time, you got to question Tua's health. Can Tua stay healthy throughout the season? He was able to last year, but can he stay again this year? And if you put all that in consideration, and then you add in the Bills side, because now the Bills have a rejuvenated, rebuilt wide receiver, or not rejuvenated, they have a younger, rebuilt, unproven wide receiver group. And then you look at some of the players they're getting back from injury, Von Miller, Khalil Shakir. You look at the fact that they lost their number one corner in Tre'Davious White and are replacing him with a youngster named Kaiir Elam. And if you put all those like teams and you compare them to the Jets really have the least worrying questions because those questions have been answered in that first game pretty much. The offensive line could still use a little bit of work, but they proved that they're much better and much improved than last year. So for that reason, I 100% believe that the Jets will win the AFC East division. Now moving on to statement number 3. This is a fun one. Baker Mayfield is the best QB in the NFC right now. Now this is very interesting considering you have QBs such as Brock Purdy, Jared Goff, Dak Prescott, Jalen Hurts, Jordan Love, and Matthew Stafford. All of those QBs, every single one of them, and then you throw in Baker, have an argument for being number one. Honestly, you can make an argument for all of them. I don't know if I trust Baker Mayfield as the best QB yet. Not that I trust him, I just don't think his stats have proven it or like that he is the best QB compared to the likes of Brock Purdy, Jared Goff, and Dak Prescott, which is why I think this statement is an overreaction. You look at it, Baker has been phenomenal with the Bucs. He had his first 4,000-yard passing. He had 28 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. He looked great last year. And he looked great in the season opener. But you also have to take into account that in the season opener, he played the Commanders, who have a new QB, a new head coach, a new owner. They have new pieces on the defense, new pieces on the offense, and they had the second overall pick for a reason. They're not really expected to do anything special this year. Maybe win more games, but they're not like expected to do anything special. So you can't fully give credit to Baker putting up numbers on a team he should have put numbers up on. For that reason, I just don't know if I can definitively say Baker is the top QB. There's an argument. I just don't know if I can definitively say Baker Mayfield is the best QB in the NFC right now. So that's an overreaction. So moving on to the fourth statement. This is a fun one too. All of these are fun. Who am I kidding? It's NFL. It's all fun. The fourth statement is the Cowboys should not have extended Dak Prescott. Now, there was a whole debate over the offseason because Jerry Jones was holding out on Dak. He wasn't paying him, and Dak wanted to get paid. He wanted to be the first $60 million man. Well, all of a sudden, news broke Sunday, and Dak became the $60 million man he wanted to be. A 4-year, $240 million deal was announced Sunday for Dak Prescott. It was an extension. So it puts him in for the next 4 years. So this year and then 4 more. And honestly, a lot of people are arguing that they shouldn't have done it. Some people are arguing they should. I believe they should have signed him. I think it is the right choice to extend Dak, which is why I think this statement here is an overreaction. It is so tough that today's game has evolved so much that a QB is more impactful and more pivotal than ever in your chance of winning a game, period. Not like regular season, not postseason, just a game. If you look at some of the previous teams that had a lot of young talent, because the Cowboys have a lot of young talent. They have Micah Parsons, CeeDee Lamb. They have a ton of young talent around them. Tyler Smith is a great offensive lineman. But if you look at that, Trayvon Diggs, forgot about him. He had an injury last year. But if you look at teams that have had great talent around, but poor QB play, it has not been well for them at all in the past. You look at the Jets recently and the Steelers. The Jets had Sauce Gardner, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, Jermaine Johnson, Quinyon Williams. And if you don't know these names, these are some of the top players at their position. And they had all of them, and they had a lackluster performance from 4 QBs, and they didn't even crack the playoffs. Like, that's how pivotal the QB position is. Then you look at the Steelers. The Steelers were able to make the playoffs because it's Mike Tomlin, and Mike Tomlin's never had a losing season. They made it in the playoffs with a 9-8 record last year. But they got blown out because the QB wasn't good enough in the game. Like, you can have all the talent you want in the world around you, but if the QB is not at least consistent or decent, you don't have a chance to win the game, which is why I 100% agree with the Cowboys extending him. Now, should Jerry have waited that long? No. You just kind of lost your own money, essentially. You could have paid him a little bit earlier before like Justin Herbert and all, and maybe given him like 55. Now, maybe Dak wanted 60, but you could have given him a little bit cheaper price because you also have to pay now Micah Parsons. But I think it was the right decision to keep him so that you can consistently get that playoff hope. I would rather consistently have a QB that gets me to the playoffs than consistently miss the playoffs because of my QB. So moving on to the final statement. Statement number 5. Bryce Young is the Panthers franchise QB. Now, this is an enticing one, especially down here in the South, because so many people are Carolina fans, and it's interesting to hear their takes on it. Some say he is, some say they aren't. Well, I'm here to say that this statement is not an overreaction. He is 100% their franchise QB. Bryce Young is 23 years old. He's had technically 3 head coaches, 2 permanent, 1 was an interim because they fired the coach early last season, or kind of in the later portion of last season. He's had 2 head coaches, which means he's had at least 2 offensive coordinators. He's not really in the best organization, at least seen in the media. And that's because the owner hasn't really given positive media takes. He's been recorded throwing water on a fan. He's been recorded yelling at fans at games. He's been recorded doing a lot of stuff that really isn't owner-like. And so it's tough anyway to play on a team that wasn't good. It's even tougher to play on a team that wasn't good and doesn't have a good organizational staff. Then you look at it, and he doesn't really have a lot of talent around him. They got Xavier Legette, who I love, great player, and he's going to be good. I think he will be very good in the Panthers. But it's hard to get the ball to your playmakers when your offensive line can't even block a traffic cone. Like, if you're getting pressured in your face 2 seconds after the ball comes to you, you're not going to be able to make your reads and make the plays and prove why you're number one. And I think it's salt in the wound when you look back at who was drafted directly after him, pick right after him at pick number 2 by the Texans in C.J. Stroud. C.J. Stroud went on to throw for 4,000 plus yards. He took his team to the divisional round. He made this entirely great jump from the Texans being the second worst team to the Texans being Super Bowl contenders in 1 year. He was a part of it. And a lot of people don't realize that if you look deeper into the organizations, why C.J. Stroud was able to succeed. And like I said, better owner, better organizational staff, better head coach, consistent staff, coach and all, better young talent, better drafting, better decision-making, all for the Texans compared to the Panthers. Now, this might be a hot take, but I believe that if you were to take Bryce Young from the Panthers and C.J. Stroud from the Texans, and you were to switch them, QB for QB, nothing else, just QB for QB right now, I believe the Panthers, or if you would have switched them last year technically, if the Panthers would have taken C.J. Stroud and the Texans would have taken Bryce Young that year, and everything else played out the way it did in real life, the Texans would have an eerily similar season, or a very similar season to what they had last year, and the Panthers would have a very similar season to what they had last year, plus or minus 2 wins. I think that if, at worst, the Texans would have 2 less wins with Bryce Young, and the Panthers would have 2 more wins with the Panthers. But honestly, that's the difference in what an organization makes. No one wants to play for an organization that is not even looked at well in the media. And for that reason, and for the talent and natural talent that Bryce Young has, and the resume he's built already, I 100% think that Bryce Young is the future at QB for the Panthers, and he will be the franchise QB for the Panthers for years to come. So that wraps up my overreaction, not an overreaction statements. Thank you all for sticking around and watching. And remember, this is Brian Sports Hub, your source for sports.